the post-Brexit agreement. Former Conservative MP Michael Brown told GB News that Democrats are trying to appeal to Irish-American voters ahead of the midterm elections.
I think this is just straightforward electioneering inside the Democratic Party from the point of view of Pelosi and her Democrat colleagues who are facing a very difficult fight in November. Secondly, bluntly, we've been here many times before, Paul. The fact is, Nancy Pelosi is bullying the British government. It will have to be solved. I think most people in the EU acknowledge that it is very unfair on the people of Northern Ireland.
Contingency plans are being drawn up to keep supermarket shelves stocked as unions warn of potentially the biggest rail strike in modern history. 40,000 staff members from Network Rail and 15 train companies are voting on action over pay. Network sources say it would create serious challenges in keeping passengers and freight trains running. Shoppers have seen hundreds of items on their food bill rise by more than 20% over the last 2 years as the number of supermarket discounts have fallen. Consumer Group, which analysed 21,000 items from 8 major supermarkets, and fizzy drinks saw the biggest average price rise, with chocolate seeing the lowest. It also found limited supermarkets' own brand items and products getting smaller in size but staying the same price. In other news, Russia has claimed victory in the battle for the southern port city of Mariupol after Ukrainian soldiers in the final stronghold surrendered. It's now launched a major offensive in Luhansk, where shelling continues as Russia presses for control of Ukraine's Donbass region. Major General Chip Chapman told GB News Ukraine's defence was significant, but they will have to accept the loss of Mariupol if they want a ceasefire.
From a Russian perspective, this joins the Donbass through Crimea with a land corridor. So that is significant as an objective for the Russians. But of course, they've also got an open flank there, which can still be attacked where the red ends as such on the north of that flank. How do they dislodge the Russians in the south? Or is it that they have to accept something there, which they don't want to do, which sets the conditions for a future ceasefire?
Meanwhile, President Zelensky has proposed a deal with allies to secure Russian compensation for the damage its forces have caused in Ukraine.
We invite partner countries to sign a multilateral agreement and create a mechanism ensuring that everyone who has suffered from Russian actions can receive compensation for all losses incurred. Based on such an agreement, Russian money located in the jurisdiction of partner countries should be arrested, frozen or confiscated and transferred to a special fund that would compensate everyone that has suffered.
It's reported the royal family are providing accommodation to Ukrainian families who fled the war. Royal family members have vowed to do their bit, but have no wish for publicity. That's according to the Daily Express. Almost 54,000 Ukrainian refugees have arrived in the UK under visa schemes, including the Homes for Ukraine programme. Pharmacists will have greater freedoms to choose alternative hormone replacement therapy if the original prescription is out of stock. The government's HRT Supply Task Force, which was set up to tackle widespread shortages, has agreed to give pharmacists more control. It's in light of low stock levels, which have forced some menopausal women to do online swaps or buy medicine on the black market. And Wimbledon organisers say they stand by their decision to ban Russian and Belarusian players from competing in this year's tournament. That's despite being stripped of its ranking points. They've said they deeply regret the impact of the decision, but in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it's the only viable decision. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, let's get back to Saturday morning.
Good morning. You're watching and listening to GB News. Coming up on Saturday morning with him and me, that's Esther and Phil.
This year's Sunday Times Rich List has been published and it's identified a record number of UK billionaires. We're joined by the man who put it all together.
We're also joined by the General Secretary of the RMT Union to talk about a summer of discontent after rail unions threatened mass industrial action unless there was a significant rise in wages.
And we're joined by Chair of the Health and Social Care Select Committee and the longest-serving Health Secretary in British history, Jeremy Hunt.
And we want to hear from you, so email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk or you can tweet us at gbnews.
But before all of that, we're delighted to be joined by Kevin Woodford, TV presenter and celebrity chef. Kevin, what's caught your eye this week in the papers?
Again, an action-packed week with news. And there's a couple of things. I think the first one, I'm a great TV addict, right? And there's a lovely story about Netflix. And the thing is, and it deals with one of your colleagues, right? The lovely lass, Nadine Dorries. So what we have is with the BBC, and she's working on that at the moment, thankfully, the licence fee is 159 quid. That relates to one household only. You know, you can't move that to whoever's next door and say, yeah, you can borrow mine for half an hour while you watch Coronation. You can't do that. You can't watch Coronation Street next door with her licence or my licence. So it's that one household. Netflix is the alternative. This story is about Netflix, really. So Netflix, for 132 quid, you can watch Netflix. And it's supposed to be just you and your family in that one. But that's not the case. Nadine found a way, right, that she could give her password to friends and family anywhere around the country, and all you got to do is type it in. Thank you, Nadine. I've just cancelled my Netflix, and I've got it still. Very kind of you, right? So for that price, 132 quid, you've got that. Problem with the BBC, it's compulsory. That licence is compulsory. You can't watch anything unless you've got that licence. So if it's good enough for Nadine, it's good enough for me to do that trick. Now, Ofcom are in the process of regulating Netflix under an updated media law. And Ofcom, at that point, will be able to police harmful content. That thrills me, because as we speak, back in the States, Netflix are filming, I suppose, the equivalent of The Only Way of Essex, but it's called The Only Way is Sussex, right? And it's the Duke and Duchess, our favourite couple, Harry and Meghan, swanning around their mansion in the States, and this whole series is to do with them. What Ofcom have given me now is the opportunity, because of the harmful, policing it by calling it harmful, it means that for me to sit down on a Saturday night with a glass of wine, right, and relax in front of the telly, I would find it harmful to watch that, right? So it's going to be cancelled as far as I'm concerned. So I'm thrilled to pieces with them. But I still think Nadine is doing the right thing with regards to sort of the BBC licence. It needs to be scrapped.
I thought you meant she's doing the right thing by passing a Netflix
password. She's doing the right thing about that.
I'm happy to give value for money, but it was unfortunate she did have to be tapped on the shoulder, so you actually can't do that in the select committee here.
Admitting it was probably... but the bit I don't understand is if there's 4 households all watching Netflix at the same time on the same password, don't Netflix monitor that? Don't they and say, well, hold on a minute.
That's funny. There's from different locations.
But here's the thing, Netflix have already said that their subscription is dropping like flies. Well, of course it is, because why would you pay 132 quid for Netflix when you can get it from the guy next door? It doesn't make sense. So yes, it should have been regulated in that sense, and they should have realised this was the problem. They obviously didn't, but they do now.
Now, somebody who can afford Netflix, Kevin, and you can probably afford it for everyone in the country, to be perfectly honest, is the couple, Joe and Jess Thwaite, who've just won £184 million on the lottery. Absolutely amazing, isn't it, from Gloucester? Now, the 2 things that struck me about this is, the first is obviously they went public. And I was thinking, if I won the lottery, which is unlikely because I don't play it, so... Would you go public if you won £184 million? And I was weighing it up, and I thought, no, I wouldn't, because I mean you'd have to tell your friends, wouldn't you, when you traded in your Fiat 500 for a Ferrari? You'd have to have an explanation. You might say I've won a few quid on the lottery or whatever. But would you go public and say I've won £184 million? I mean, just think of the begging letters.
So I guess it's show off versus anonymity. I think you've got to balance. You want everybody to know now you are a huge winner.
Would you go public?
Absolutely no chance whatsoever.
He could already have won, for all we know. You could already won, we just don't know.
He probably already gets all the begging letters.
Second class on the train, for goodness sake. I wouldn't have been... Well, I wouldn't be here, would I, if I'd have won?
Well, I think that's the other question.
That is the point.
Would you give up your job?
Because Joe Thwaite has already given up his job as a communication sales manager, and his wife, Jess, is apparently mulling over what she's going to do with the hairdressing salon she has with her sister. So would you give up... The thing is, would you give up work if you won all that money on the lottery?
I wouldn't give this up with you two. Because this is just a sheer joy. To get up at this time in the morning and come all the way in here is just sheer joy.
Every time you hear it's like a lottery win.
It's like, it is a lottery. No, well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a whole theory about, are you working because of the fiscal necessity to work, or are you working because it's something that you want to do and that you love doing? Would I work? No, if I won the lottery. But you know what I think is wrong with that as well, quickly, is I think it's a shame that it's one winner at 184 million. I think it should be 184 winners at 1 million.
But you mean do a Nadine and share it all out?
Correct, absolutely.
Now, the next story, different to that, and this is the head of the police watchdog, Andy Cook, saying, to his police officers, look, really... throw a bit of a blind eye to people who are shoplifting. We've got a cost of living issue here. Don't go about maybe pursuing this shoplifting. I have to say, startled, taken aback, do not believe that. If you commit a crime, you commit a crime, because no crime is victimless. Those small shop owners have got a cost of living crisis too. They've got to pay the way. I mean, what signal is that sending out? And haven't you automatically given people an excuse? Whether it is because you've got a problem with the cost of living crisis? Absolutely not. Shouldn't be doing that. Mind you, we've got a great guest on later who's got an app where you can get food for free, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later. But there is no excuse for stealing. Maybe the word shoplifting sounds better, as it were, than stealing, but that's what you're doing. And for the head of the police watchdog to come out and say, it's permissible. No, absolutely not.
But isn't there... I tend to agree with you. But there's also an argument, isn't there, that says, I mean, you hear the stories of somebody who's been attacked or robbed or whatever, and they phone the police, and the police can't get to see them and can't deal with it. And yet there seems to be an ability for them to get to the supermarket and to arrest somebody for... I was in my local shop the other day in Goring, and the police were there. 2 policemen were there with this particular guy who'd been nicking stuff. They were there for the whole time that I shopped there. They had him sat there, and then they took him away. Now, I'd like to see a bit of sort of leverage with it all, and I'd like the police to be able to respond to everything, to be honest with you.
Yeah, but what you can't do is let the shop owners then end up policing what's going on, because then you have a rise of violence and attacks against the shop owners. There should be somebody who can come in there and stop what's going on, because there isn't there? And we've done a lot of work on that to protect shop workers who ultimately then bear the brunt if they have to tackle something.
No, I agree with that. I do agree with that.
Well, look, we're going to come back. We're going to be back with you at 11 o'clock when you'll feel you've got another lottery win, because you'll be back with us.
He's a silver tongue charmer, isn't he?
No. I mean what I say, Philip.
Brilliant. Now, the Sunday Times Rich List for this year has been published, and it's found that Britain's super rich have grown their combined fortunes by 8% to a record £710 billion in the last 12 months.
The 34th edition of the prestigious rankings identify a record 177 UK billionaires. Well, we're delighted to say that we're now joined by the compiler of this list, Robert Watts. So, Robert, what is our fascination with this rich list?
Morning, Esther. Morning, Phil. Yes, it's usually, in days gone by, it's the biggest selling edition of the Sunday Times each year. Why are readers so interested in it? I think it's a couple of reasons. I think, firstly, a lot of people, not all of the people on this list, but a lot of people find some of these people on this list inspiring. Often this is largely about self-made wealth. These are people who started a business from scratch, perhaps from their bedroom, from their kitchen table, and grown it over the years, into something that's worth at least, wait for it, £650 million, which is what you'd need to get into this year's rich list. But I think also there's a British fascination with wealth, isn't there? How the other half live, how they're doing, and I think that's a big part of it as well. But also there is perhaps a more serious point to this as well, which, we live in a democracy and we want to know where wealth lies and where it's being made.
Transparency argument there. Well, Robert, looking at that transparency, what did you see? What patterns did you see changing? Who's become rich? Who's lost the money? What happened over COVID?
Well, what we saw through COVID was that online retailers did extremely well. People like Boohoo, the fast fashion retailer, the Hut Group, THG, did very, very well. Their high street competition was closed, so people headed online. Perhaps some people were spending less money on commuting, less money on going out in bars and pubs. They couldn't do that, so they were spending their money online. Now, what happened when that opened up again? We had the great reopening. The high street retailers were doing well, and a lot of those online retailers were struggling. So there's been a passing of a baton there. The Russians really surprised me this year. I thought we'd see a big fall in their wealth. That simply hasn't happened, with the exception of Roman Abramovich, who's down an eye-watering, wait for it, £6 billion this year. The other Russians haven't suffered. Why is that? Well, a couple of reasons. Firstly, there's a world of difference between freezing assets and seizing assets. Lots of those oligarchs, lots of those wealthy Russians have lost the use of their nice super yachts and their London mansions and their country estates, but they're still the legal owners of them. Secondly, they already squirreled a lot of money away in Cyprus and the British Virgin Islands, places like that. And then thirdly, you remember the ruble crashed when Vladimir Putin's troops went into Ukraine? Well, the ruble come back very, very strongly in the last few weeks, and it, in fact, worth more against the pound than it was before the invasion. So these Ruskies who've got companies' assets in Russia, if we'd valued them a month or so ago, they would have been well down, whereas actually they've recovered very strongly.
Now, we're talking about people who are very rich, some of them who've earned more money, whilst we're also living through the biggest cost of living crisis in 40 years. I'm just wondering, will the rich list go down this year, or will it appear distasteful?
Well, we think it's incredibly important that we know where wealth is being made and where it's being accumulated. And if you try and silence that, you're sort of shutting out the argument. And I think a lot of people have got in touch, and I can see from the readers' comments that having the Chancellor of the Exchequer on the rich list for the first time, which we've finally been able to prove the wealth of his household, we think that probably demonstrates the importance of why we need to know about these sorts of things. As I say, some of these people are desperately inspiring. There are millions of small business people up and down the country who look at these people and think, yeah, I want to be on that list one day as well. But there are others who are taking the view, goodness me, wealth is out of control in this country. We need to be getting more out of these people. We need to be charging them perhaps more tax, think of other levies to extract their wealth, think about things like a wealth tax. And if we don't know how wealthy these people are, we can't inform the argument, can't inform the public debate. So I think there is a value, a very strong value for everyone in having this kind of research done.
Quite right. Rishi making the rich list has made all the papers. But I wonder, it's his wife's money and his wife's family's money. So I'm wondering why you're using his name when really it's her name.
Well, they're a joint entry. In fact, she comes first in the list, which you can read online now. It went live yesterday morning. We always have, for our 34 editions, we always have aggregated family wealth. When you're married to someone, the finances all get mixed up, don't they? You have a household earnings, and as you say, the vast amount of their wealth, or the majority of it, is down to a £690 million holding in Ms. Murty's father's company, Infosys, which is an Indian-based company. They have dividends of around about 10, 11 million pounds a year from that. He did do pretty well himself. He was no slouch. He worked for Goldman Sachs. He was a hedge fund manager for some years. But the bulk of her wealth certainly comes from her.
Robert, if they aggregate our wealth, I wonder what they'll get up to.
Not much. I don't think we'd feature highly. But I just wondered, Robert, how? I mean, as I understand it, these are minimum levels of their wealth, and I just wondered how easy it is for people to try and mask their wealth, just so that you don't get your beady eyes on exactly what they've got just by sort of putting it all in a bank account, so you've got no idea what's in there. Does that happen, or are people proud for everybody to know how wealthy they are?
It's a real mix, Phil. I mean, this is a jigsaw puzzle that keeps me occupied through the year. 90% of the job is trawling through company accounts, shareholdings in public companies. But about a third of these people do talk to us and share information with us that wouldn't be necessarily out in the public domain. There's a big problem in terms of transparency. You're absolutely right. There are lots of people on the list. They have assets offshore that we simply can't see. There's some progress in terms of that, in terms of more places around the world making it easier for us to see that sort of financial information. But when people come to us, it is for a variety of reasons. I mean, some people feel the Sunday Times Rich List is a matter of public record, that they want their achievement, they feel, which is wrapped up with their business success, to be recognised and recognised properly. Other people, they want to live below the radar. They don't like publicity. They don't want any public profile whatsoever. But we think our readers deserve something that's as carefully researched and as complete and accurate as possible. But yes, our pretty much our first rule in our rules of engagement is these are minimum estimates of these people's wealth based largely on what we can see.
Robert Watts, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. And you knew who was number one, the Hiduja brothers, with £28.47 billion. Unbelievable.
Absolutely. Now, coming up after the break, we're joined by comedian John Martin to discuss banter in the workplace and joke writing for Sir Ken Dodd.
We'll also be speaking to rail union boss Mick Lynch.
And we want to hear from you today, so if you want to get involved in the show, please email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews. See you after the break.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Philip.
Everyone is talking about the cost of living and a surge in food prices. Well, there's an app that can help. Olio connects neighbours and each other with local businesses so that surplus food can be shared rather than thrown away.
According to the company website, Olio believe that small actions can lead to big changes. Well, we're delighted to say that we're now joined by the CEO and co-founder of Olio, Tessa Clark. Tessa, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I just wondered, if, for those who don't know, if you could just tell everybody what Olio is and how does it work?
Yeah, certainly. So Olio is the local sharing app that connects you with your neighbours so you can give away your spare food and other household items and also lend and borrow things as well. And to date, we've had 6 million people join us and they've given away over 50 million portions of food and also 5 million other household items.
And in this time of cost of living, really important that, you know, that there's something out there like that. But how did it come about? What was that light bulb moment?
So that light bulb moment happened to me 7 years ago. I was living overseas and moving back to the UK. And on moving day, the removal men told me I had to throw away all of our uneaten food. Now, I'm a farmer's daughter, so I grew up working incredibly hard on the family farm, and I know just how precious food is. So I wasn't prepared to chuck this food in the bin, and much to their irritation, I bundled up my newborn baby and my toddler, and I set out into the street, clutching this food, hoping to find someone to give it to. And to cut a long story short, I failed miserably. But I wasn't to be defeated, so I went back to my apartment. And when the packing men weren't looking, I smuggled the non-perishable food into the bottom of my packing boxes. And that was the moment I thought, this is ridiculous, the lengths I'm going to avoid throwing away perfectly good food when I know there's someone with 100 metres of me who would love to have it. The problem is they just don't know about it. And why isn't there an app for that, I thought, and now there is.
So, Tessa, so is this people who, you know, like us, we've got a spare tin of rice pudding that we're not going to use?
No. There is never a spare tin of rice pudding that he's not going to use. But there could be some fruit.
Exactly. I mean, the rice pudding will definitely get used. But is it that we've got something that is not going to be used, and therefore we put it up on the app and people can contact us, or is this retailers, you know, big supermarkets who have got things coming to the best before day to put stuff on your app and people can go and get it? Is it both, or is it one of those?
So the answer is it's both. So in the first instance, we enable people to just snap a photo of any spare food they have in their home. They can add it to the Olio app. Neighbours living nearby get an alert. They can browse the listings and request what they want and then pop round and pick it up. And actually Tesco released some data just this week, which said that every single day, 500,000 people in the UK are throwing away unopened and unused food. And so we're really encouraging absolutely everybody, in particular when we've got a cost of living crisis going on, to take 10 seconds to share their spare instead of throw it in the bin. And you're absolutely right. We've also got a part of what we do, which is about connecting Olio's trained volunteers. So we call them food waste heroes, and we have 45,000 of them now. And we connect them with their local business, which might be a Tesco or a Pret-a-Manger or someone like that. And on their allotted time and day, the volunteer will pop out their house, across the road, they'll go to their local supermarket, for example. They'll pick up all of the unsold food. They take it home, they add it to the Olio app. Within minutes, the neighbours are requesting it. And minutes later, they're popping around and picking it up. And that makes sure that that food, instead of being tossed away in the supermarket, being considered sort of a waste stream, is instead redistributed and eaten by thousands of local communities.
Is there a cost at all to any of this, Tessa? You know, whether it's to set up on the app or are people selling food? Is there a charge?
No, there isn't. So the Olio app is free to download and free to use. We generate our revenues by charging the businesses for the service we provide. So at the moment, they're paying a waste contractor to take that food off, considering it as waste, and instead they now pay us to make sure it's eaten by people living in the local community.
This is unbelievable, and so many people are talking about what they can and can't afford. So many people are now talking about the price of food going up. It's in all the papers today by 20%. I'm going to ask you, are you ready for, I'd say, the surge in usage of your app?
Yeah, we have seen a dramatic increase in the amount of demand for listings that are put on the app. And it's not just food, I should stress, that there's a lot of demand for. So over the last sort of 3 or 4 months, the time in which it takes for an average non-food listing to be requested has halved. So it used to take about 5 hours after you put a household item on the app to be requested. It's now taking just over 2 hours. And that just shows how much the demand there is out in our communities, people who are wanting access to food and everyday household items. And yet, meanwhile, there are millions of people who have lots of stuff in our homes that we don't need, we don't use. And our message is just to really encourage people in this time of difficulty to share their spare rather than to leave it on shelves gathering dust or even worse, throw it in the bin.
Tessa Clark, thank you very much indeed, not just for coming on today, but for coming up with that incredible idea and making sure that we're helping a lot of people with their food and food usage. Thank you very much.
That's brilliant, isn't it?
I know, and you said, where did the money come from?
Yeah,
as it's a business, how should, and it was to take away what would have been a charge for taking away waste is good food that we can all share.
I think reducing food waste like that and helping people with the cost of living, I just think it's a brilliant...
That's why we had to have her on.
Brilliant idea. I thought you meant the surge in demand after we'd highlighted it on the show. I thought you were going to say not because of the cost of living.
And it will be that as well, especially from us too.
Now, a police officer in Liverpool has sued for sexual harassment after a colleague allegedly called him Dolly Parton because he only worked from 9 to 5.
I tell you, it does make me chuckle that, but PC Stephen Knox had changed his shift patterns to suit his family's needs, but soon found himself on the receiving end of jokes, with Dolly Parton pictures being printed out and the classic tune being whistled in his presence.
It got us thinking about some of the nicknames we've heard over the years.
So go on. Give us some of your nicknames if you've got your voice back.
I've got my voice back. Well, I mean, I thought the one that I particularly liked, there was a chap called Dave who used to wave his arms about above his head, and he was known as Mexican Dave, which I thought was particularly good.
And there was also the chap who got the nickname Levi because he used to leave bang on 5:01 every day. But anyway, that's what we've got. But we're delighted to say that joining us now from Venice, but via Liverpool, to discuss the story and some of the best nicknames he's heard is comedian John Martin. Hiya, John. So, banter
morning,
in
folks.
the office.
Beautiful Venice.
In a little
I'm
room
coming
there.
to you live from the Seaborne Quest cruise ship here in Venice. Venice is beautiful. They say we have canals with gondolas in it. I said, we can beat that where I live. We have canals with shopping trolleys in them.
Hey, listen, that's very relevant now. We've just been talking about food, where you can get what you need to do. But banter in...
Well, some of my jokes should have a best before date on them, I think.
And I'm sure they
You've
have.
got to come on this cruise ship. You've got to get Philip to take it on this beautiful Seaborne ship. Philip, you're going to have to dig deep, my friend.
John, have you not heard there's a cost of living crisis on?
No, but what we want to know, look, and
You don't have to dig deep, Philip. You're with Esther, and you always remember, you can always tell a Liverpool girl, but you can't tell her much.
Exactly right. But what I was going to ask, Liverpool is known for its banter. So when I read this story that it was actually a Liverpool police officer who was suing his colleagues over this banter, I thought, but isn't that what makes life fun? This humour, and you've made a career out of it. You're a comedian, and you've written for Ken Dodd, you've written for Jimmy Tarbuck, and Ken Dodd used to have a nickname for you. So let's get into this banter and how important it is.
Well, you know, when I first heard this story about the policeman Dolly Parton, I thought, I wonder if there's a couple of other reasons why they call him Dolly Parton, but we won't go into that. You know, a nickname is it's almost a term of endearment. We've got a cruise director on our ship here, John Barron, and we call him, he never buys a drink, so we call him Crime, because crime never pays. You know, I grew up I grew up near the Bootle docks in Liverpool, and everyone had a nickname. All the dockers were famous for these nicknames, and they were a term of endearment. You know, just some of them that I'm trying to remember. There was one called High Noon because he was always shooting at 12. There was another Liverpool docker got the nickname Mints because he never arrived after 8. Lots and lots of all these. There was another guy used to call him Van Gogh because whenever anyone asked him if they had something, he said, "Yeah, I've got one here." terms of endearment, you know, it's a nickname's great. And as you say, Doddy, I spent an awful lot of time around the great Ken Dodd, writing for him and being his friend and being close to him. And he gave me the nickname of The Apprentice. That's what he used to call me. And I love that. He used to say, "Oh, it's The Apprentice." And I just absolutely adored that. And I remember when Ken Dodd told me he was getting a knighthood, I always called him Doddy. I used to say Doddy. And I said, "Well, what can I call you now?" And we settled on the nickname, Sir Doddy. Lovely. It's a term of endearment, of course it is.
And you've got your book out, A Comic's Journey. And I wonder, sort of, how do you become a comedian, at least one that pays? How do you earn your living out of telling jokes?
Well, it's something that I've always wanted to do since I was a kid. My book is called I Want to Be a Comedian, Mr. Tarbuck, because I actually wrote to Jimmy Tarbuck when I was a kid to say, I want to be a comedian, Mr. Tarbuck. And he phoned me up and helped me, and he's helped me ever since. So it's something that I've always wanted to do, and I'm very lucky I'm able to do it. And I try and find humour everywhere I can. You know, we've got this couple who've just won £184 million in the Euro Million. And they are the only people in Britain now who can safely fill their car with petrol.
But you say you were the first UK government-sponsored comedian.
Yeah, I got £40 a week. I wish I was earning that much now, to be honest with you. Yeah, I got sponsored. This was in 1984. It was like a government startup scheme. And yeah, I've just gone from strength to strength, working all the working men's clubs all over Liverpool and Manchester, some very tough times. And now here I am on a beautiful cruise ship called Seabourn. And I leave today. So for breakfast, I only had some Cheerios. But yeah, that's what I do. You know, I mean, I've been watching this Johnny Depp trial with Amber Heard. And then there was another one, Rebecca Vardy with Colleen Rooney. And I thought, I wonder if the two winners actually meet in the final.
We heard we'll say goodbye, but we'll definitely have you on again soon. And you saw that because it's now called Wagatha Christie, it's now going to be called the Scouse Trap, because Colleen trapped Rebecca Vardy. It just made me smile. Hey, listen, John, great having you on, and speak to you soon. And we've definitely got to have that banter back in the workplace. I
look forward to it, Esther. And Esther, before we go, thank you for everything you've done for the excluded people who got absolutely nothing, of course, as you know, during the pandemic. And you've been an absolute fighter for them, and you've never stopped. So on behalf of 3.8 million people, thank you, Esther.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. And look, that's something else we've got to return to. We've got to talk about that. These were the people who didn't get anything during the lockdown. And we'll come back and speak to you about that, John, another time. Thank you.
Absolutely. But we'd certainly like to hear people's nicknames for their colleagues at work, wouldn't we? So if you want to get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'd love to hear some of the nicknames that you have for your friends and colleagues at work. Coming up after the break, we are heading for, or I'm hoping we're not, but we might well do if it's down to those trade union leaders, a summer of discontent. We're also talking about a Peter Hitchens article published this week, which proposed England separating from the United Kingdom. And we want to hear from you, so do get involved. Send us your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet us at gbnews.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. Snap part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle, and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil.
Now, rail unions have threatened a summer of discontent unless there are significant wage rises. It's reported that action could begin next month. The RMT union are agitating for it to be the biggest rail strike in modern history.
Transport Secretary Grant Shapps said the proposed strikes were the last thing the country needs as the UK continues to recover from the coronavirus pandemic. Well, joining us now to discuss the proposed strikes is Secretary-General of the RMT union, Mick Lynch. Morning, Mick. Now, this is my thought, that during lockdown and COVID, the railways got a huge subsidy, £16 billion from government, and that's when other people were on furlough, only getting a percentage of that wage. And we've just spoken to other people about the forgotten limited, people who got nothing. So don't you think you're reading the situation wrongly? Is this the sort of gratitude to now decide you want to go on strike?
Well, our members worked right the way through COVID and still working, of course, to keep the railway network going, move the goods around the country and move those key workers. Our members, unlike many people in society, didn't get to work at home because they had to operate the railway. So during that period, they had no pay increase whatsoever. We're going into the third year where our members involved in this dispute have not had a pay increase. And now, as a reward for that, as well as a pay freeze, we're being threatened with the loss of thousands of jobs. And we believe that the industry is taking a risk with the maintenance of the infrastructure. And we could go back to the worst days of Railtrack and the privatised railway, where we had lots of accidents, lots of fatalities and injuries, unfortunately, and the degradation of our system. So what we want is a properly staffed railway, a railway with a human face, not a stripped out railway with no people on it, and we want our members to earn a decent living. So what we're looking for is a negotiated settlement with these companies. They're carrying out government policy, a direct Tory mandate to freeze pay in the railway sector as well as the public services in general. And our members can't be made to pay for that because our members struggle like every other worker in this country, and all workers in Britain need a pay rise. They need to keep up with this rampant inflation rate that we've got and the ever-increasing cost of living. So there's a cost of living crisis, and one of the responses to that will always be workers looking for a pay rise through their trade unions.
I just wondered, now that people are working from home a lot more, COVID obviously delivered lots of people working from home, it's now a lot easier for people to do that. Does that mean that strike action's less potent now than it was before because it won't disrupt people's lives? And by going on strike, you said that you want, you don't want a railway where fewer people are using it and all the rest of it. Are you not just creating the climate where actually more and more people just give up on using the trains because, they think, well, I don't know if they're going to be on strike or not. It's too inconvenient. It's too much of a guesswork whether they'll be running or not. And all you're actually doing is damaging the railway industry and therefore the future of your members.
Well, the damage to the railway industry is caused by the government's policies, which is a privatised railway where profit is extracted. Last year, the railways made £500 million in profit through the rolling stock companies, the subcontractors, and indeed the train operating companies. What we need is a settlement to the issues. We don't want compulsory redundancies in our industry. We want a safe railway. Now, we don't want to cause any damage to any worker in Britain. We want everyone to have an enjoyable life and a convenient transport system. But what we can't do is just surrender to the idea that rail workers are going to be poorer going forward so that the private companies can make mass profits. And we're seeing that all across British society. The energy companies are making billions and billions of pounds in profit, while we're expected, all of us, to pay more in our bills for the utilities and the energy supplies, and of course food and clothing and all the rest of it. And for working people, the people on modest salaries, which is where our members are, people earning the mid-20,000s, maybe £30,000 a year, the proportion of those costs that we're all experiencing is, of course, much greater. So what we're seeing is a transfer of wealth from working people through the dividends of these companies to the rich. And we've got to rebalance that. And a strong trade union movement taking appropriate industrial action in defence of working people is the right response. And that's what we will do if our members vote for it. Of course, the companies have got time to negotiate a settlement if they wish to, and we will provide that opportunity to them and talk to them in dialogue and in order to get a settlement to the issues at stake.
But, I mean, do you really think you have public support when you go on strike and interrupt people's lives and, you know, the proposal to sabotage the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations with strike action? I mean, is that really the right way to go about getting public support for your case, which people may or may not agree with? But do you really think that's the best way to get that support for your members' case?
Well, this strike won't take place, any strikes won't take place during the Queen's Jubilee. That will happen before any of this takes place, so that's not an issue. The first thing we need to do is get the support of our members. Our members want a pay deal. Every worker in this country wants a pay deal, and they all need a union that's capable of delivering that for them. And it's a pity that there aren't more unions and more organisations willing to take up those workers' causes. So we will find out if we've got that support on Tuesday when the ballot votes are declared, and we're sure that our members will deliver a massive mandate in favour of this action, because the alternative to that is surrender, where we just accept ever continuing drops in standard of living. We surrender the argument of the cost of living to the rich in this country, and we strip out jobs and face a railway system that is degraded and could become a hostile environment for people that need passenger assistance, women travelling alone, and people that need assistance with ticket offices and all the rest of it. Plus, of course, the risks they're taking with the infrastructure itself. So this is a battle for the future of the railway, but there's also a battle in Britain in general for whether working people are going to be exploited by the rich or whether we're going to balance that out in the workplace and give us an opportunity to earn a decent living.
Mick Lynch, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning and giving his side of the argument. I was interested with the words like surrender, and I kind of thought this is what we don't need, this sort of polarisation, you sort of win or lose, sort of entrenched in. Really, it should be about negotiation. And from what I'm read, they felt there was no negotiation. It went straight to a ballot. Obviously, it comes to a conclusion on Tuesday, and it shouldn't be about that. If you want the best now, you need the public, businesses, government coming together to help everybody, not this entrenched sort of union, old-fashioned, I'd say, 1970s union action.
Yeah.
But I'm glad Mick came on this morning to tell us about that.
Now, broadcaster and journalist Peter Hitchens has called for England to leave the United Kingdom. Writing in the Daily Mail, he called for the restoration of England as a way of preempting Scottish and Welsh demands for independence.
In the article, Hitchens said he has long found the words English and England secretly thrilling and urged readers to look around Europe and see the happiest nations are the small, compact ones who focus on their own business and contentment.
We're now joined in the studio by Chairman of the English Democrats, Robin Tilbrook. Robin, I take it you have got lots of sympathy for what Peter Hitchens said, but do the English Democrats want an English Parliament within the United Kingdom, or do they want England to completely separate from Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland?
Well, we did originally campaign for an English Parliament within a federal UK. But what we found was that basically the British political establishment and all the people who were involved with that seem to want to break England up into regions. And these regions are completely bogus. They have no history to them. The main reason why they haven't managed to get their act together on that so far is because they can't agree where the boundaries should be. But of course, what that means is there is actually an ongoing threat to the unity of England. And that's why we moved about 10 years ago to a position where we're campaigning for English independence, much as Peter Hitchens was talking about. And in fact, I was in correspondence with him about 10 years ago, and at that point he was sort of all for the defence of the UK, but he's now moved. And I think this is a slow burn issue. Once you start to think about it, you tend to move over to English independence, I think.
Now, I said in Parliament years and years ago that I thought England would get tired of the United Kingdom before Scotland ever did. Do you think if there was a referendum on this in England, England would vote to leave the United Kingdom, or has that not quite... Have we not got to that point yet?
Well, we don't get very much coverage of the issue, so it's difficult to say what would happen if people actually were starting to think about it. I saw an opinion poll a couple of years ago which suggested over 40% already were saying that they were in favour of English independence. So I think, bearing in mind that the SNP started off with 25% when they launched their campaign for Scottish independence, we'd have a good chance. And once people started to think about how much the union is actually costing England with the Barnett formula and all the rest of it, we're literally giving something in the order of, well, the last time it was actually worked out was 33 billion was going to Scotland, and the Barnett formula generally was costing 49 billion a year, but that's more than a decade ago. There's a good chance it's up to about 60 billion a year, the Barnett formula. That is a huge amount of money that's going out of England.
But surely you just need to explain that and rein in the spend, not break us all up. I'm a unionist here, so I think you're quite right. You have to explain, look at what we're giving to you, and actually we can't afford to do that now. There are parts of Northern England, Southern England, Eastern England that need that money or what have you. But I'd sooner us all stay together. Is it not an old argument? Aren't people in Scotland now saying we don't want to leave you as much as they're thinking of an indie ref, but less people are interested in this? Don't you think more people now want to clump together?
Well, the key argument that was being used in the Scottish referendum was the union dividend, by which they meant the immense subsidy they were getting every year from England. And the fact is, what do we in England get out of that? I just don't see that we do actually get very much out of it. I tend to say we get the bill and the blame.
Robin Tilbrook, Chairman of the English Democrats, thank you very much for joining us. We'd like to hear from our viewers about this, whether or not they think England should leave the United Kingdom or not, or whether, like Esther, you feel we should all stick together.
Maybe sort out where the money's going and share it evenly between all of us, but not break us up. Like, what have you got? Have you got a couple of views there, Phil?
I certainly have. George says, we have apparently a billionaire chancellor with a billionaire wife. How can such a man possibly be qualified to understand and make decisions for the good of ordinary people? He cannot have the slightest knowledge or understanding of our situation, and I think his budget demonstrates that.
Eddie says, if anyone thinks that shoplifters get prosecuted, they're living in a dream world. We were talking about this before, about the chief of the police watchdog saying sort of overlook shoplifters in this cost of living crisis. Eddie saying that sort of happens anyway. He said, I work in a large supermarket in Hampshire. At best, the police are called and they get a telling off. Usually, they just get banned from the store. So not a lot is happening there anyway. Thanks for getting in touch with us, Eddie.
Now, Rebecca Vardy has been accused of repeatedly lying under oath and destroying evidence during the closing arguments in her libel trial against Colleen Rooney.
It's fair to say the court case has garnered huge media attention for the wrong reasons. But for those of you who are not in the know and haven't been following Wagatha Christie, look who it is we've got joining us.
In the studio, we've got lawyer and broadcaster Andrew Eborn, who can fill us all in with the latest, with the trial's finished.
Look who it is. I love that introduction.
Look who it is.
I love it. It's great to see both of you on a Saturday, and I love the orange. I was so jealous beforehand.
Do you know, for those who can't see the orange who are watching on radio, you're probably lucky.
You need colour radio.
It's a very bright orange. It woke me up this morning at 5 o'clock.
Absolutely, waits as always.
So the trial's finished between Rebecca Vardy and
yes,
Colleen Rooney.
they've finished the evidence side now, and it is extraordinary. Forget The Crown. The only British drama you need to watch in the last few weeks was Wagatha Christie. And it's an extraordinary case, and it's a case that should have never been brought. The basic sort of principle is this, just to fill people in who don't know, if you've been living under a rock or have been watching other dramas from Britain. The basic case is this, is that Colleen Rooney, wife of Wayne, basically found out that her Instagram account was being, stories she was telling to her friends and circle of friends were being leaked to The Sun. So she had to work out who's leaking these stories to The Sun. It's supposed to be a small group of people. And she whittled it down by putting false stories out there, some of which were things like her basement had flooded and so on and so forth. Until one day, she just had one account, and one account only, who she leaked a particular story to. And that story appeared in The Sun. So all of a sudden, she then said, it's ... in that dramatic moment, Rebecca Vardy's account. So all of a sudden, they suddenly turned around. It was called Wagatha Christie, rather brilliantly by Phoebe Roberts, who came up with the name, and she should have copyrighted or trademarked that name because she would have made a fortune. And the basic thing is, what Rebecca Vardy argued is, hang about, no, I didn't. It's got nothing to do with me. I didn't leak this. I would never sell stories to the papers. I would never work on that sort of basis, and therefore it's defamatory. Throughout this case, they tried to urge them to settle, because that's what English law says. And in order to be defamatory in this country, you have to prove that it's a statement, and that it's defamatory, and it's likely to cause what they call basically serious harm. So it's all been changed by the Defamation Act of 2013 about serious harm, because they want to get rid of trivial cases. The only people who are going to benefit in this case are the lawyers. And whenever I talk about cartoons to depict the legal system, there's a wonderful cartoon from the 1700s by a cartoonist called J. Bright. And what it does, depicts litigation. It shows a cow, and you basically have the plaintiffs pulling the horns of the cow, and the defendants pulling its tail, and the lawyers are milking it. Because the lawyers are the ones who benefit. And the costs involved in this case already are estimated to be about £2 to £3 million. If, and it's a big if Rebecca wins, then what will happen? Her damages are likely to be trivial in comparison. I would be surprised if she may even just say, look, here's a nominal sum on that sort of basis, because the judge and everybody along the way has made it clear this case should not have been brought.
Have we got a prediction for who's going to win?
Well, I can say...
Apart from the lawyers?
Well, the lawyers are going to win, definitely. I think both sides will lose, because even when you win, you may also work on the basis that you have to pay your own legal costs. I think there's all sorts of things that have been unpacked in this trial, not least evidence has been lost. So there was a suggestion when they talked about Rebecca Vardy's account, they were saying, well, hang about, it could have been her agent who worked on that sort of basis. And so as a result of it, they were saying that it was lost in the sea, and there's hilarious moments about Davy's locker, Davy Jones's locker, and that sort of stuff, what it meant. The prediction, I would think, is that Rebecca Vardy's got a difficult case, and even if she wins, it's basically going to work on that sort of premise.
Well, thank you very much indeed
and no
for that,
draw, probably.
Absolutely. So, look, the case continues, but coming up in the next hour of the show, we're joined by the UK's longest-serving Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt. So don't go anywhere.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning and welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Philip. Coming up this hour, we're joined by the UK's longest-serving Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, to discuss his new book about the NHS.
We're also joined by the openly gay former footballer to talk about 17-year-old Jake Daniels, who came out this week, becoming the first openly gay male footballer since 1990.
That plus plenty more after the latest news with Bethany.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 11. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Labour is calling on Boris Johnson to urgently explain his meeting with Sue Gray on the so-called Partygate report. Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner has said people deserve to know the truth. It's understood the two have met at least once to discuss the report while it was being drafted. The Cabinet Office is contacting around 30 people, including the Prime Minister, to warn them of the contents ahead of its publication. The Foreign Secretary will meet with a top Democrat later today over government plans to scrap parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol. It follows the US House Speaker's warning that Congress won't support a free trade deal with the UK if it discards the post-Brexit agreement. Well, former Conservative MP Michael Brown told GB News the Democrats are appealing to Irish American voters ahead of the midterm elections. In other news, Russia has claimed victory in the battle for the port city of Mariupol after Ukrainian soldiers in the final stronghold there surrendered. It's now launched a major offensive in Luhansk, where shelling continues as Russia presses for control of Ukraine's Donbass region. Meanwhile, President Zelensky has proposed a deal with his allies to secure Russian compensation for the damage its forces have caused in Ukraine.
We invite partner countries to sign a multilateral agreement and create a mechanism ensuring that everyone who has suffered from Russian actions can receive compensation for all losses incurred. Based on such an agreement, Russian money located in the jurisdiction of partner countries should be arrested, frozen or confiscated and transferred to a special fund that would compensate everyone that has suffered.
Contingency plans are being drawn up to keep supermarket shelves stocked as unions warn of potentially the biggest rail strike in modern history. 40,000 staff members from Network Rail and 15 train companies are voting on action over pay. Network sources say it would create serious challenges in keeping passenger and freight trains running. Secretary-General of the RMT union, Mick Lynch, told GB News he's confident members will vote for strike action.
The alternative to that is surrender, where we just accept ever-continuing drops in standard of living. We surrender the argument of the cost of living to the rich in this country, and we strip out jobs and face a railway system that is degraded and could become a hostile environment for people that need passenger assistance, women travelling alone, and people that need assistance with ticket offices and all the rest of it. Plus, of course, the risks they're taking with the infrastructure itself.
Shoppers have seen hundreds of items on their food bill rise by more than 20% over the last 2 years as the number of supermarket discounts have fallen. Consumer Group, which analysed 21,000 items from 8 major supermarkets, and fizzy drinks saw the biggest average price rise and chocolate saw the lowest. Business and finance commentator Michael Wilson told GB News supermarkets are trying to cope with food prices that are out of their control.
People looking after households, going to the supermarket and doing your own sums. That's unfortunately what we'll have to do. And the consumer will win in the end. Make no mistake about that. They call it consumer destruction in the business. And what it means that after a certain kind of price increase, a certain kind of shrinkflation, people will say enough is enough, and we'll see some action.
And pharmacists will have greater freedoms to choose alternative hormone replacement therapy if the original prescription is out of stock. The government's HRT supply task force, which was set up to tackle widespread shortages, has agreed to give pharmacists more control. It's in light of low stock, which forced some menopausal women to do online swaps or buy medicine on the black market. Health Minister Maria Caulfield says the sudden increase in demand since the end of last year has put pressure on supplies.
I want to reassure women there's over 70 products in the UK, and there's only really about 10 or less that are experiencing this shortage. So for the vast majority of products, we have got plenty of supply. And for those small numbers, we're introducing measures to make sure that those supplies are back up and running.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now let's return to Saturday morning.
Good morning and welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Philip. Coming up this hour, we're joined by Jeremy Hunt to discuss his brand new book.
We're also joined by the Director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, Paul Johnson, as well as former footballer Thomas Beattie.
And we want to hear from you today, so keep those GB views coming in. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at GBNews.
But before all of that, Kevin Woodford is back with us, giving us his take on today's papers.
Right, OK, well, originally what I was...
I built you a bid there.
I love it. I love it. It's great. I love it. I love it. I love it. Originally, I was going to talk about our friend Jamie Oliver, right? And that's what I was going to talk about. But when I saw the images yesterday of Jamie stood at Whitehall, Westminster, and looked at the size of the eating mess he'd taken, right, and then looked at how much weight he's put on, I thought, I don't need to say anything about Jamie because that's fine. It says it all. Great imagery, Jamie. But what I was taken by was an article by Ross Clark in the Mail on cyber security, which actually concerned me quite seriously. I mean, we all accept that CCTV is part of our lives, and, you know, we can be thankful for aspects of it because it does keep us safe and secure, albeit there's the big brother element to it. But apparently, and I didn't know this, but apparently there are tens of thousands of these CCTVs around the UK produced and provided by China, 2 companies in China. And I think that's a serious concern for us, to be quite frank, because there are flaws within that in terms of security. I mean, and in fact, Italy had them as well. Italy had a situation where allegedly some of the content from an Italian unit went back to China, which caused them a problem. The USA have banned them completely. I know that, thankfully, our health secretary, Sajid, has got rid of them out of his particular... But they're still in police headquarters, they're still in hospitals, they're in schools, they're in universities. And I just think that we shouldn't really be giving access to our environment and our safety and our security and our lives to a foreign state, quite frankly. I think it's time that we... You know, there's facial recognition with these things. They've got built-in microphones, all sorts of stuff.
No.
And in fact, poor old Matt Hancock, I mean, granted, that didn't go back to China, and I'm sure he's thrilled that it didn't, when he's having a little cuddle.
They're thrilled it didn't.
I'm sure, absolutely. Yes, that's true. When he's having a little cuddle in the office. And that was taken by a camera, by a phone.
And I think you're right. You've got to say, what is, you know, part of our country's infrastructure? What is sensitive and what we need to keep secure? Is it CCTV footage? Obviously, we did say when it was about our 5G network, we are looking at that again. We won't then have Huawei in there. So we did separate the two out. Right. What do we think we need? Very helpful. We needed CCTV. But what would be absolutely part of the sort of UK infrastructure? But you're saying now, because this CCTV is so good, face recognition, all of the other recognitions, what you're saying, etc., you're putting that then within that infrastructure and highly secure information, and we shouldn't therefore be sharing.
I think it's very dangerous. I mean, you've got to remember there are two Chinese companies providing this particular piece of equipment, and you've got to remember that the Chinese state the companies, no matter who they are, have to supply information back to the Chinese state. That's part of the rules over there. And the biggest worry for me is you go back to the Matt Hancock situation. And granted, okay, somebody had taken a photograph of this, you know, from the CCTV. But nevertheless, we're saying that there's a CCTV facility in an office in Westminster.
I bet you some of our viewers will probably have a comment on that.
No, I'm sure they do. I mean, I would have thought that we should ask the security services, is this a problem or isn't it a problem? If they say it is a problem, we should get rid of them. And if it isn't a problem, then it's not a problem. I don't know, but surely...
But why do we need a Chinese company to provide this for us? I mean, surely, you know, we should be able to get that elsewhere within our own country, I think.
No, it's certainly a big issue, I think. Now, I'm going to go on a different tack altogether here, Kevin, because this story caught my eye in the Sun today. The headline did too as well. But it's page 25 of the Sun. A dog owner's winning entry in a cutest pet contest was disqualified because her beloved dog was dead. And the headline is, "Your dog's dead cute. I mean, your dead dog's cute," which I thought was quite a good headline. But Jill Tubbs entered a snap of her chocolate Labrador Bounty sitting on a plant pot at 9 weeks old. And the local paper ran the competition and said that she'd won. And then they found out that the dog was actually dead and disqualified it and gave the prize to the runner-up. Now, I'm with Jill, who entered the competition, because Jill said the competition asked for the cutest dog picture. And we sent that one in. It didn't say that it had to be a current dog or that the dog still had to be alive. So I'm with you. I'm with her.
Absolutely.
You know, the newspapers made a mess of it.
Absolutely.
They should have made the qualification.
And it's a great dog.
It's a beautiful...
It's a great dog.
It is a cute dog. Well, I got a fun story here because obviously I thought, the Sun's back to having good headlines here. And it actually is on the front page. And it said, "I'm doing my bit," in brackets, on the side for Ukraine. So then when you hear the story, dad dumps other half for refugee they took in.
No.
So that's the story there.
I've got to say, I've got to give credit to Esther here because she predicted that this would happen when she did actually predict this would happen.
And it said there the Ukrainian refugee came over. The dad of two, Tony, 29, stunned his partner, Lorna, 28, by walking out just 10 days after they welcomed Sophia into their family. She came from Lviv and she said, "I fancied Tony straight away. It was Lviv at first sight." But although, you know, we're having, you know, a joke at the headlines and we're joking at, you know, great sort of puns and what have you, this is a deeply, to me, upsetting and disturbing story.
Of course it is.
And I just think, you know, you've opened somebody, or you've given somebody opportunity, you've opened up the home, and now the home is broken within 10 days. And I know it'll be an extreme case, and I know it won't happen a lot. I just thought, I wish it wasn't front page, though, because I think it's just too much goodwill at the moment to lots of people, and that just sours all of the goodwill that everybody's offering
total
up.
abuse of hospitality and kindness.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Interesting one. But you did predict this was going to happen. I've got to give credit. I think the worrying bit, certainly not in this case, but I think there is a worry. I wonder how many people who might be sort of predatory have actually decided to take a Ukrainian person in. You know, I mean,
there's always that danger, wasn't there?
Whether or not they've been
but
properly,
all of this
well.
is going to unfold, and sometimes within the speed with which we wanted to act, because people are desperate, and we had to get them out, flee from war-torn countries. When you don't do the checks as thoroughly as you might otherwise done, then sometimes sort of this happens. But listen, Kevin, as always, wonderful doing the paper review, and we will see you in a couple of weeks.
Even if I win the lottery, I'm coming back.
That's reassuring.
And even if you win the lottery, we're expecting you to share it.
But I will, you know.
We'll play that clip back that you said about if you win 184 million.
But the UK's longest-serving Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, is releasing a book in which he looks at how we can eliminate unnecessary deaths in a post-pandemic NHS.
In the book, Jeremy Hunt says that he was shocked to the core by failures in care, including avoidable deaths. Well, we're delighted to say that Jeremy Hunt joins us now. Jeremy, thanks for joining us. We've been going through the book, which actually is very critical in many respects of the NHS and its, you know, things about avoidable deaths and the fact that it doesn't take complaints very well and learned from them particularly well and has a target culture. Given that you were the longest-serving health secretary, people might say, well, blooming heck, you shouldn't have been writing a book about it. You should have been sorting it out when you were the health secretary.
Well, good morning, Phil. Good morning, Esther. And it's a pleasure to be with you for actually my first ever interview on GBNews. So I'm really delighted it's with both of you. That's exactly the question people will ask. And I don't think there's any market these days for politicians' memoirs where they try to buff up what they did and say how they got it all right and so on. What people are interested in is the NHS, not me. And so I've tried to be honest about what I got right and what I failed in. I did have a big emphasis on reducing avoidable death. And by the end of my time, we had 3 million more patients using good or outstanding hospitals. In fact, when I arrived, we didn't even know which of our hospitals were good and which weren't good. But I didn't fix the problems in the social care system. The fundamental problems in our A&E waiting times got worse, not better. So I'm pretty honest about all of that in the book. But the reason for writing it is to say, what do we do now going forward? What are the big things that need to change? And you're absolutely right. One of the things we've got to get better at is learning from mistakes, because things go wrong in all healthcare systems. But what happens too often in the NHS is the lawyers get involved, the regulators get involved, doctors are worried about getting struck off the register. And the most important thing, which is that we learn why a tragedy happened and we make sure it never happens again, ends up going to the back of the queue.
Jeremy, I'd like to say I appreciate your honesty. I mean, people always say, why aren't politicians a lot more honest? And that's the reason being, when you are, people say, well, why weren't you doing it at the time? There's always a quick answer back to you there. But I think when you say 150 preventable deaths a week, that would be the same as an aircraft falling out the sky every week, then there is a lot of work to be done. And you said, looking forward, what should we do? And again, there's another layer of complication on this, because coming out of COVID and COVID lockdowns, we've got much longer waiting lists. So I'm just wondering, you there, what would you do then going forward? Because we've got all of these backlogs to get out the way, as well as the other issues within the NHS.
Well, that's the right question to ask, Esther, because the world is full of books which analyse beautifully the problems we face and can't answer the question, well, what would you do about it? So I think writing this book, which 3 lockdowns actually gave me quite a bit of time to think through. If you said to me, what are the 2 biggest things we should do to improve the quality of care in the NHS? Number 1, I'd say train more doctors and nurses. We spend the same proportion of our GDP on health as France and Germany. France has 20% more doctors per head. Germany has 60% more doctors per head. We have chronically too few doctors, nurses, midwives. That's the first thing. The second thing is we've got to reverse the terrible mistake that was made under the Blair government 2 decades ago, when we scrapped people having their own family doctors. Patients obviously were very sad to have a system that most of us now have, where you're not attached to a doctor, you're attached to a surgery. But last year we saw the clinical evidence that you are 30% less likely to go to hospital if you see the same doctor over a long period of time, 25% less likely to die. And why is that? Because if you have a doctor who knows you, knows your family, you're far less likely to have a misdiagnosis. They're far less likely to miss, a crucial sign that you could have cancer. And it was just a big, big mistake.
Just wondered, Jeremy, I mean, I appreciate what you've just said there, but what you didn't mention was sort of the bureaucracy in the NHS. And when in 1948, the first year of the NHS, it cost £11.4 billion in today's prices. The 2018-19 budget was £153 billion. It's gone up faster than the GDP in the country's gone up. It's gone up faster than public expenditure as a whole. That's clearly not sustainable. Since 2009, and like I say, you were there for a lot of this period, the number of very senior managers in the NHS has gone up from 944 in 2010 to 2,700 last year. So, I mean, is this not the problem, that the government over the last 12 years has just sort of not tackled the massive bureaucracy, and that's where all the money's going into?
Well, I think they're two different issues. I totally agree with you. The biggest issue in the NHS today is the bureaucracy. There's 1.4 million people in the NHS. It's the 5th biggest employer in the world, biggest in Europe. Bill Clinton had a great saying. He said, politics is like working in a graveyard. There are lots of people underneath you, but they're not necessarily listening. And it does feel like that when you're health secretary on top of this huge pyramid. And that's why I say in this book, we should scrap the targets. We have more targets in the health service than in any other country in the world. And targets create bureaucracy because you end up having to employ people to check up on everyone. And the result is in our system that doctors, people running hospitals, nurses, they're always looking over their shoulder to their line manager to see if they're hitting the target they've been given. And they can't spend so much attention on the patient in front of them. So absolutely scrap national targets, free up doctors, nurses, midwives to focus on the patient in front of them. On the sustainability question, that is the $6 million question that is faced actually in every country in the world. I mean, the truth is we're going to pay more for our health and care. In America, you're going to pay more through your insurance premiums. In France and in Germany and Holland, you're going to pay more through your social insurance premiums. In Britain and Ireland, you're going to pay more through your taxes. And I think that is just the reality. We're living for much longer. And there are new medicines coming on stream. And so we've just got to be honest with people and make sure if it's taxpayers who are paying, that we root out the inefficiency and the bureaucracy so that people feel they're getting value for money.
The target culture, I mean, I agree with you. It leads to perverse incentives, targets, you know, you end up... But you could have got rid of the target culture when you were the Secretary of State for Health. You didn't. I just wondered whether there's a lack of political courage when it comes to it. Because, of course, if you're the Secretary of State and you get rid of a target for the number of times, you know, hours spent in A&E or something, and then somebody waits for sort of 4 times that after you've just got rid of the target, you're going to be on the front page of all the national newspapers saying this is the person to blame for the reason why you've waited so long. So is that the reason why you didn't get rid of the targets? Because of that, you feared that if you did do that, that would happen, and it's really a lack of courage that prevents politicians from doing that?
I don't think it was a lack of courage in my case. It was something slightly different. I wanted to get rid of the targets. I introduced the Ofsted inspections of hospitals and care homes and GP surgeries. And I thought once you've got that, you don't need all these targets because you've got someone independent going around telling you if a hospital is good or if it should be put into special measures. But I thought I need to hit all the targets and then I'm going to scrap them. Because otherwise people will say the reason I'm scrapping the targets is because I'm not. And unfortunately, that day never came. And I was moved to the Foreign Office. So I do look back and wish that I got rid of them anyway, because I do think that they are really bad in terms of patient safety and they create the wrong culture in the NHS. But I hope Sajid takes this opportunity because I think that, by the way, I think he's a very good health secretary. I think we're very lucky to have him. And I think at this moment after the pandemic, people are looking for a fresh start for the NHS. And I think this is a moment when you could come in and say, actually, we're going to do things differently. And we're going to make sure we're focused properly on patients. And we are going to scrap these big national targets.
But look, politics is a difficult game. It's a febrile game, and there's always lots going on. And I always say never has there been a time when you can go from hero to zero in no time. And we've seen that all the time, particularly with party leaders. So if the opportunity did arise, you've had time out, you've contemplated what went on with the NHS, you've looked at, you know, being in various other departments, would you go for leadership?
Well, I'm not sure people will have me when they've read this book, which catalogues in gory detail all my mistakes. But I've always said that I don't rule out going back into frontline politics and even having a crack at the top job. I don't think now is the moment. We are in a very, very dangerous international situation. I know we're all thinking about Partygate at the moment. I don't think that's what will determine the next election. I think the big issues around the economy, the international situation, who's got the best plan for the long-term future for the country. Those are the things that will determine the next.
What would
that Ukraine, just to finish, Esther, I think if we had a hiatus right now, and it takes several months to change a leader because of the Conservative Party rules, I think Putin would be absolutely delighted, and it would be absolutely the wrong thing to do.
OK, but if it were, and it did, and there was an opportunity, what would you say your qualities were, and what would the difference be between you and Boris if you were to go for leader?
I think it's probably not sensible to have that discussion if you don't believe we should have a contest now, because I think it just stokes all the speculation. But let me say this, because I've said it before, but I'll say it to you. I'm obviously a totally different person to Boris. In fact, I think everyone in the world is a totally different person to Boris, because he's such a unique person. Would I have done things differently during the pandemic if I had been Prime Minister and won that contest in 2019? For sure. Would I have made some of the mistakes that Boris made? I don't think I would have, because of my experience as Health Secretary. But I would have made different mistakes. I think it's impossible to go through something as extreme as a pandemic and get everything right.
Would you have locked us down? I think that's the
reality, not just in this country, but actually leaders all over the world.
Would you have locked us down for as long?
I actually thought that we could have avoided all lockdowns if we'd been much quicker and set up test and trace as they did in South Korea and Taiwan. Those two places actually didn't have any lockdowns at all in 2020. So that would have been my preferred route.
Jeremy Hodden, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.
That was interesting, wasn't it? He wouldn't have done the lockdowns there. Obviously, I sat next to him in Cabinet, and I have to tell you, we'll see. You should definitely be back in Cabinet. Let's put it that way. Go on.
Well, I'm not sure. I think he probably would have ended up locking us down, to be perfectly honest. But anyway, we'll see.
So Chancellor Rishi Sunak is under increasing pressure to help more households as the cost of living crisis reaches record highs, and millions around the country feel the impact in their daily lives.
We're joined now by the Director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, Paul Johnson, to talk about the worsening situation and what can be done to improve it. Paul, thank you very much for joining us this morning. How long is this inflationary pressure going to be with us in the economy? How long a slog have we got?
Well, that's a very good question. I don't have the answer to it. It's certainly going to be with us for the rest of this year. There's big increases in energy bills coming in the autumn, and we're increasingly seeing, I think, prices going up within the industry sector, within services, wages going up, which suggests this is going to go through to next year at least. And if you look at all the forecasts, a few months ago, the expectation is that inflation would peak about now. Expectation is that it will continue to rise through the year, at least to the end of this year. And I'd be surprised if we get back down to the kinds of inflation we've been used to for the last 20 years and more. It's going to take, I've thought, at least 2 years and possibly more than that.
I just wonder, there's a lot of speculation about the role of the Bank of England here in terms of raising interest rates. I just wondered whether you felt that they'd been a bit slow off the blocks in raising interest rates, that if they'd have done it a bit earlier when the economy might have been able to sustain it, we wouldn't be in this situation now, and whether or not they should raise interest rates, or will that cause stagflation, as some people speculate?
Well, the problem the bank's got is, of course, they've only got one instrument, and there's a whole lot of things which are driving inflation which don't have much to do with interest rates. Whatever they'd done with interest rates last summer, the energy prices would have been going up, supply chain problems around the world would have occurred. I don't think them putting up interest rates would have made much difference to Mr. Putin's plans with regard to Ukraine. That said, I do think that I was surprised that they weren't expressing more concern about this in the summer. We could see that some of those problems were there, the supply chain problems and so on. And we knew that a huge amount of money had been thrown at the economy over the previous 2 years. So whilst I think there is a case that they could have done a bit more sooner, I think the truth is it wouldn't have made an enormous amount of difference. I think it would have helped, and I think it's a shame that they didn't do it. But a lot of what we're living through at the moment is got very little to do with the interest rate decisions they could have made. That said, going forward, it's really important that these inflation expectations don't get lodged in people's minds. And I think the bank has a really central role to play in that. They're going to have to show that they are really serious about getting a grip. And in my view, that means that they need to increase interest rates, even given the state of the economy, potentially quite significantly over the next year.
I just wonder if you could answer a question. Obviously, there's a big political hot potato at the moment, is the windfall tax for energy oil and gas companies and whether or not they should pay that. Just to try and hoping you can take the politics out of this for us and just tell our viewers, how much would a windfall tax raise from those people and how much would that be per household, knocking off their energy bills?
Well, I mean, the answer to that is sort of as long as a piece of string, because it depends what level you raised it at. But I believe that the Labour Party is suggesting it might raise in the order of £2 billion. You could do something which raised a lot more. I think that's probably a conservative estimate. That's actually a relatively small amount in context of energy bills and so on. Remember what the Chancellor did back in February, and we forget about that very quickly. He put $9 billion into reducing energy bills and reducing the council tax back then. So £2 billion, if it is what will be raised, wouldn't make an enormous difference to the total. In terms of whether a windfall tax is a good idea, I mean, in general, I think windfall taxes are quite dangerous. I think in general, one wants to avoid them because it's quite important for companies to have a stable and predictable tax regime and not feel that they're being punished ex post. But in this case, I think if there's ever a moment when you could defend a windfall tax, it's probably now because of the scale of the profits that are being made for no good reason of the behaviour of the companies, just being very lucky that they're producing gas and oil at a time when prices are very high. I don't think actually a modest windfall tax would do a great deal of harm on this occasion.
Well, can I ask you a quick question? Here in the Mail today, it's saying the poll that proves the PM must cut taxes now. So as we're looking at inflation, as we're looking at the cost of living, as we're looking at how we help the public, do you think cutting taxes now would be the right way to go?
I have to say I don't. We are, as we've just been discussing, in a highly inflationary environment. Cutting taxes now will clearly help people's budgets, but it will be adding yet more fuel to the fire. The problem that we've got at the moment is problem of supply. It's very expensive to buy gas and oil and a whole bunch of other things actually from across the world because of supply problems. Putting more money into people's pockets, I'm afraid, would make that, or potentially make that worse. What I do think the Chancellor should have done is to increase the benefits and incomes of people on the very lowest incomes. And if you look at what the International Monetary Fund, the OECD and other international commentators are saying, they're saying essentially, yes, you do need to help those who are really struggling, those on the lowest incomes, but you cannot loosen fiscal policy in a way which puts more money into everyone else's hands, because that was just put fuel on the fire. And I think it is worth remembering, whilst lots of people on average and so on incomes are struggling, and indeed on higher incomes, an awful lot have also saved huge amounts of money over the last 2 years as a result of COVID, probably 200 billion of additional savings. So there is still a lot of money at the macro level around, partly fueling this inflation. I do think it would be a mistake for the Chancellor to pour fuel on that fire.
Paul Johnson, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Coming up next on Saturday morning, we speak to a former footballer about Jake Daniels' decision to come out as gay.
And all your latest sports and showbiz updates too. But first, here's Bethany with your latest news.
It's 11:33. I am Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Labour is calling on Boris Johnson to urgently explain his meeting with Sue Gray on the so-called Partygate report. It's understood the two have met at least once to discuss the report while it was being drafted. The Cabinet Office is contacting around 30 people, including the Prime Minister, to warn them of the contents ahead of its publication. The Foreign Secretary will meet with a top Democrat later today over government plans to scrap parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol. It follows the US House Speaker's warning that Congress won't support a free trade deal with the UK if it discards the post-Brexit agreement. New legislation is expected in early June. Russia has claimed victory in the battle for the port city of Mariupol after Ukrainian soldiers in the final stronghold there surrendered. It's now launched a major offensive in Luhansk, where shelling continues as Russia presses for control of Ukraine's Donbass region. And unions are warning of potentially the biggest rail strike in modern history, as 40,000 staff members from Network Rail and 15 train companies vote on action over pay. Network sources say it could create serious challenges in keeping goods moving and supermarket shelves stocked. And shoppers have seen hundreds of items on their food bill rise by more than 20% over the last 2 years, as the number of supermarket discounts have fallen. Consumer Group, which analysed 21,000 items from 8 major supermarkets. Pharmacists will have greater freedoms to choose alternative hormone replacement therapy if the original prescription is out of stock. The government's HRT supply task force, which was set up to tackle widespread shortages, has agreed to give pharmacists more control. Low stock has forced some menopausal women to do online swaps or buy medicine on the black market. On TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. We'll get back to Saturday morning in just a moment.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's 2 questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Philip. Jake Daniels has become the UK's first current male footballer to come out as gay since Justin Fashanu back in 1990.
The 17-year-old forward, who plays for Blackpool FC in the Championship, has said the decision to go public with his sexuality will leave him feeling free and confident.
Daniels has been congratulated for his bravery by the likes of Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp, Manchester City forward Jack Grealish, and indeed the sporting community as a whole.
To discuss the story and indeed tell us about his own experiences of coming out is former footballer and entrepreneur Thomas Beattie. Glad to have you there this morning. So when you saw Jake coming out and speaking so honestly and openly in public, did it take you back to when you were thinking about it but decided not to do it when you were playing football?
Yeah, a little bit. I think my process was a little bit different to Jake's. I think he knew a little bit younger and was more accepting of who he was at a younger age. I think the environment I grew up in was probably not as conducive to really embracing who I was quite confused. I mean, I looked around and didn't really see anyone who I resonated with. So it left me quite confused. So I think for my process, it was a little bit different. Like I said, he was a lot more comfortable with who he was at a younger age. So, but obviously, you know, there's parts of his journey, similarly with Josh Cavallo's as well, which, you know, resonate with me. And I'm delighted to be just be a part of that, and for them to have that liberation to kind of live their truth.
And I have to say, when I was watching it, I thought to myself, gosh, he's only young. I hope he's getting the support and the protection that he needs. We know what Twitter storms are like. We know what the social media is like. So actually, my heart went out. I personally think, well, what does it matter? I'm live and let live. Do you need to say these things now? So I guess there's those two points to you. Do you need to say it? And will he have that protection that he needs from being sort of bold, as it were, and coming out?
Well, firstly, yeah, you know, I'm quite passionate about this. When people say, you know, does it matter? It really does matter a lot, you know, because the reality of it is some people, especially the younger generation, you know, they think that they're better off dead than for people to know who they really are. So, you know, first and foremost, it saves lives. You know, it gives hope and inspiration to people who, you know, can look at somebody now in a position of responsibility, you know, who's in the public eye, and where they can look at and say, you know, he's like me, or, you know, I can resonate with him, or I understand him. So, yeah, you know, it does matter. There's been so few examples of it. So, I mean, you know, a lot of people are indifferent about it. A lot of people think it shouldn't be mentioned, but you know, the reality of it is the statistics don't lie. You know, there's so few footballers and athletes in general, but just footballers who have come out that, you know, it does matter. Because if it didn't matter, then, you know, we would have a lot more openly gay athletes, especially footballers. So, yeah, in answer to the first part, you know, I think it does matter, especially for the younger generation. And the second part, obviously, I think the social media companies are doing a better job now in protecting people who are in vulnerable positions, like Jake coming out. You know, we can I helped before he came out put some blocks on his social media. Obviously, going through that process myself, you know, I kind of understood some of the things that may or may not come to him, and similar with Josh as well. So a little bit more experience now for some of the bigger social media companies to kind of understand how to handle that process in coming out. Obviously, in the stadium's a little bit of a different story. It's kind of an unknown, right? He's kind of in new waters, really. But on a social media aspect, a lot of that can be taken care of now.
Out to Jake to help him.
What was that, sorry?
So did you reach out to Jake to help him?
Yeah. So, well, we spoke briefly before he come out, and I just kind of said to him, obviously, I'd offered my support, and for anything he needed, I was around. But, you know, more importantly, I wanted to make sure for him that there was these social media restrictions put in place, just certain words, emojis, and things that, obviously, from my experience coming out, I was aware of what may come for him. So, along with Meta, actually, I'm in quite close contact with them as a community partner. They're quite proactive in being able to put some of these blocks on. So we set that up for him and just made sure that process for him was just as wholesome as it could be when he was coming out, just to protect him a little bit, because obviously it's an overwhelming thing anyway, right? So you know, I wanted to make it just as seamless as possible.
Thomas, I just wondered when you were playing and maybe, you know, you didn't want to come out, you maybe feared the reaction or whatever. What was it that you would have feared at the time? I mean, obviously the reaction to what Jake has announced has been entirely positive from what I can see. Did you fear a poor reaction from the media, from the fans, from other players? You know, or if you did have those fears, would they have been unfounded? Do you actually, or have things moved on a lot since you were playing?
I think so. I think things have moved quite a lot in the Western world, specifically in the last 10 years. Obviously, when we talk about this as a topic, it's quite vague, because obviously there's some areas of the world where it's still an absolute no-go. So for our Western culture, you know, it's progressed a lot. We see examples in film, fashion, media, politics, journalism, football, especially sport. I think is a place where we've still yet to really redefine the roles of a male, more specifically, toxic masculinity, you know, what is expected of a man. And I think that's been a more of a barrier to entry. But for me personally, I never feared my teammates. I think footballers in general are just so used to different cultures, different languages, religions. That's normal for athletes. You know, I think athletes on the whole are very accepting, but I think it was a social issue amongst a community which was, again, just untested water. I think, especially at that time, we almost exonerated ourselves from it for so long. We don't talk about it. We don't really know how to bridge the topic. And that was why when I came out, I'm in such a privileged position. I'm very blessed, so I'm somewhat protected. So when I came out, I wanted to kind of shed light on my journey and try and inspire a little bit of change. And so obviously when Josh Cavallo reached out to me and he ended up coming out, which subsequently sparked a reaction from Jake, I think that was really fulfilling for me. But again, it was 30 years before that process, right? So, you know, we almost exonerated ourselves from that for such a long time. So it's amazing that now we're having these conversations and, you know, we're talking about these things again.
Thomas Beattie, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your experience, and also for the support that you gave Jake, which I'm sure he fully appreciates. So thank you very much indeed for all of that. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
And when you're back in the country, because he's in Singapore, so he got up, I think, in the middle of the night to speak to us. When he's back, he can come in and have a chat with us too.
Now it's time now for a look at the biggest sporting events taking place this weekend, and we're pleased to be joined in the studio by Aidan McGee. Aidan, what did you make of that? And Jake coming out?
Yeah, I was covering it earlier in the week. We had my old colleague from Sky, Mark McAdam, in as well. He came out as a reporter. Covering football in, 2014 now. I mean, it seems like eons ago. It was only 8 years ago. It was a different climate then, and he came out on the front of Gay Times magazine. You know, I'd known the guy for 3 years. I had no idea. It was a real shock. It was a real shock. I was quite jealous of his six-pack, though, I must admit, when he came out and posed. But it was a big thing for him. He didn't really get much help from his employees at the time, I have to say, from my recollections. But he's gone from strength to strength since then. And I think he'll tell anybody, including anybody we've had on the show, including Jake Daniels, it was the best thing he did in his life. 5,000 footballers in the PFA members, and only one of them has come out. It's astonishing numbers. Those don't stack up.
So from that sort of positive story there of Jake to very negative stories that have been going on in football, invading pitches, kicking fans, butting footballers. What's going on at the end of the season?
Well, I don't think very many of those people went on to the pitch with the intent of causing public order offences or with the,
It was a headbutt of Billy Sharp, wasn't it?
There was, but I mean, most of those, if you look at the 5,000 Everton fans on the pitch on Thursday, it was a joyous occasion. They looked as if they were going to be, having spent £500 million, and it was going to be a catastrophic relegation. They thought they're suddenly out of jail. With a game to spare, so it was joy unconfined. It was bloodletting. That's what it was. And now there are a few idiots who confronted Patrick Vieira, made life very comfortable for him. Football authorities have to take some flack for this as well, because he should have had a security detail alongside him. He's a very famous individual, Patrick Vieira. Even if he wasn't managing Crystal Palace, he was recognisable on that pitch as the former Arsenal captain and a huge player, obviously, in the history of the Premier League. So he shouldn't have been on his own. And we look at the other event as well, in the Europa League, and the flashpoints we saw between Rangers and Eintracht Frankfurt. Why on earth was the Europa League final held in Seville? It holds 43,000 people. Both the teams contesting in that final, have bigger grounds than the one that the Europa League final was being held at. There are 95 bigger stadiums in Europe. The bigger the stadiums than that could have held it.
The bit I don't understand, I mean, look, I like a good pitch invasion, to be perfect. I think it's part,
How about the streakers as well? Anything. You don't want to do it on a pitch, feel free.
If you look back in history and you look at, glorious things, it's part of the, everyone not just sat there, clapping politely.
Yeah, like theatre, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's great when people look back on those things, and I think it adds to the theatre. What I don't understand is these morons. I mean, Nottingham Forest had just won.
Yes, I know.
I mean, why can't you go on the pitch and be joyous?
Yes, but
Everton had just won the match.
Yes, I know.
Why does some lunatic have to go on the pitch and start having a go at Patrick Vieira? Why can't they just celebrate the fact?
Yes, you're right. But it just shows it only takes one. It only takes one, and it did only take one. The Ollie McBurney incident in that same game where he stamps on a fan, he reckons he was just stepping over him. We're waiting for the video footage to come forward with that. But, I mean, that's just one person. That's one person to headbutt Billy Sharp. It's, I think, one, maybe two who attacked Vieira at Goodison Park. So look at the majority. I think that's why if one person spoils it for the rest.
They ruined it for everybody.
This is not a return. This is not a return to football violence of the 70s and 80s and 90s, which was a completely different thing.
Yeah. But I was going to say big weekend.
Yeah,
go on,
be
Phil.
careful how you answer this with Esther being here. But you know, it's the last weekend. So who's going to win the Premier League? Man City or Liverpool?
I'll make one prediction. I don't think we're going to see any flashpoints tomorrow because the fans will have heeded the warning. And there's threats, obviously, next season, what could happen. I don't think anything will go off tomorrow that we'll be ashamed to talk about. But in terms of the field of play, yeah, I think it's got to be Manchester City. I mean, they're going to be Aston Villa. The twist here, Steven Gerrard, right, unfulfilled. The only thing he didn't do at Liverpool was win the Premier League title. We remember the slip in 2014 when they played Chelsea.
Yes,
they lost 2-0. They lost 2-0, and obviously City went on to win it. Is this his time? 7 years after he left Liverpool, is this his time to actually help win Liverpool?
Like the way you're thinking, Aidan, because I hope so. All of the pressure now is going to be on Stevie G.
I mean, again, let's hope he doesn't slip up this time.
No, exactly.
What about Burnley and Leeds? Who's going to get relegated?
I think Leeds have got the tougher assignment against Brentford. Newcastle was so good against Arsenal the other night. And Newcastle technically didn't have anything to play for, but their tails are up. The town's behind them, and I think that they could possibly get a result at Burnley. I could see both of them drawing and Burnley staying up by virtue of goal difference. And it's a disaster for Leeds going down.
Goes to show
it's so hard to get back up.
Goes to show what I know. I was there slagging off Burnley for getting rid of Sean Dyche, saying it was an idiotic decision and it could be vindicated.
Yeah, they could still go down. You know, it's
the Champions League place, Arsenal.
Champions League place. Tottenham have got to win at Norwich, and they've got to at least better. They need a point. Need a point at Norwich. If you can't win at Norwich is historically one of the worst teams we've ever seen in the Premier League. So I think if you can't go there and get a result, then you've chucked it away for yourself. Arsenal have got Everton at home. It's a relief for Arsenal that Everton have now survived. They haven't got much to play for, whereas they could have had a situation where Everton would have been going there needing a win. So that would have been difficult for them. But I think Arsenal for the Champions League, Liverpool for the title, and I think Burnley are going to stay up on goal difference.
And your dad will be there, won't he?
He
at Anfield, hoping for the best. Aidan, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Nice to see you.
Now, lots of you have been getting in touch, not least, I might say, about people's nicknames. And I probably should have said that we're before the watershed, shouldn't we? For something, before we put out
the ones we don't read out. That'll be for why.
But Adam said he had a friend in the army who was called Bungalow because he had nothing upstairs.
Tim Dare said it took me ages to realise that one of the guys who we work with, everybody was calling him Keth, but actually his name was Keith, but he had an eye missing.
Going on to different issues, there's lots of comments about the RMT potential strike. Alan says, probably the largest union left. Typical as usual, they threaten to hold the country to ransom. They can't run the railways now and couldn't run them when they were in public ownership. They will get no support from me. Every train is already disrupted with little or no weekend or holiday service.
Mike says a decent living wage, because we had Mick Lynch on earlier and they're agitating for this biggest industrial action since the 1926. They're hoping to get on the railways. He says, last time I looked, train drivers' salary is higher than an airline pilot. And as we said, they were protected during lockdown. The government put £16 billion into keeping the railways going and paying wages.
And then just on Jeremy Hunt and the NHS, mixed feelings about that. John says Hunt left the National Health Service in a terrible state for Hancock to try and manage and then blamed Hancock for everything that was wrong. Ambitious man who wants to stab Boris in the back to get the leadership. But Marcus says, correct, Jeremy, you are a good man. So a mixture of view there. Now we're delighted to be joined by Hayley Palmer for our weekly showbiz update. Hayley, we were interested in David Beckham, weren't we, and his favourite meal.
Now, this is my favourite subject too, food, of course. So apparently David Beckham went home to his mum's and he had gammon, chips, mushy peas, fried egg, coleslaw and pineapple. Quite a combination there, but he says he loves going back to his mum's. And I think that's really nice because he must be going out to all these posh restaurants all the time. And let's be honest, those portions in fancy restaurants are quite small, aren't they? So he obviously likes to go to his mum's and have a good old hearty meal.
I understand it was followed by a jam donut. I was thinking, Jamie Oliver, eat your heart out here, a meal for champions. I'm going to repeat it again, Hayley, because I was quite staggered myself. Gammon, chips, pineapple, fried egg, coleslaw and mushy peas. I mean, I can't believe Victoria eats that when...
No, I think she might have had the pineapple.
Or the coleslaw.
But I think this whole thing, isn't it, and this is what we're talking about, you've got people interfering in what other people eat. You've got a top footballer here who's super, sorry, mind your ears, Phil, super sexy, got a super wonderful body, but he eats well and he exercises well. So there's nothing wrong per se in chips and a fried egg and mushy peas, so long as you have a balanced diet. So I thought that was a very interesting story, but I have to say, a bad combination as far as I was concerned. Anybody who's got coleslaw and mushy peas, bad combo.
Yeah, that's not a combo, is it, together? Definitely not.
What's your favourite meal?
I love going to my mum's, I think she's watching, for a roast dinner. I've got to say that, otherwise I'll be in big trouble. And you know when you go to your mum's and it's just really comforting and I sit there and eat it and, oh, yeah, it's just amazing. What about you?
And, well, we haven't got time for that because we want to get to the Top Gun premiere because I know we need a quick answer. So, come on, what? Tom Cruise, is he as short as you think?
I can confirm he is half the size of me, but I am about 6'2" in heels. So...
But was he shorter than Kate as well?
Yes, because if you see in the paper, you can see he was helping her up the stairs.
Is it a picture worth seeing?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But
did he make you do what Esther makes you do and take your heels off for a photo, Hayley?
I know, I always take my heels off.
I do, it's absolutely true. I say, get your heels off, Hayley, if you're standing next to me.
I'm a giant, what can I say?
And Greece, you went to the Greece
musical. Peter Andre playing Vince Fontaine. He doesn't play Danny. He's great. And it's a slightly different version of Greece. I mean, you've got the classic kind of songs in there, but kind of sort of a different look. Like Sandy, she had like brown hair, not blonde hair. And yeah, it's worth seeing though. It's at the Dominion Theatre, out now.
Fantastic to have you with us. We will see you next week for more showbiz stuff. That's us from us today, but don't forget, don't go away because you've got the wonderful Alistair with Friends next.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A drier, brighter day today compared to yesterday's heavy showers. Bit of sunshine here and there, but it won't be completely fine. There will still be a few showers around. Here's the bigger picture. Low pressure up to the northwest, high pressure down to the southeast, and another little weather system just pushing in from the west. That's going to bring more cloud and some rain to Northern Ireland and western Scotland later on. But for most, it's fine out there this morning. Some cloud around, but some places seeing some sunshine. A few scattered showers over the Highlands and Western Isles of Scotland. But it will cloud over as that weather system approaches, bringing some patchy rain to Northern Ireland and to western Scotland later on. For most, though, it's looking dry and bright, and certainly for most of England and Wales, we'll see some sunny spells, lifting the temperatures up to 19 or 20 degrees. Cooler further west, and particularly in that northwestern corner. Maybe one or two afternoon showers for Wales and western parts of England, and certainly we'll see more rain coming into the western side of Scotland this evening. Otherwise, it's a largely dry evening, and we'll keep some clear spells across the south, which may allow temperatures, certainly in rural areas, to drop down to single figures. But mostly we'll be starting Sunday, like we're starting this morning, at around 10 or 11 Celsius. The details for Sunday, and it really varies from the southeast, where it's dry and bright, up to the northwest, where it's cloudier with rain at times. Certainly showery rain for the Highlands, the Western Isles, but also dull and damp for parts of northwest England, southwest Scotland, north and west Wales. Could see some drizzly rain too, and some showers likely for Northern Ireland. But much of the south and east will stay dry and bright, and if we hang on to sunny spells across the southeast, feeling quite warm, 24 degrees, whereas most other places will again be stuck in the teens and feeling quite cool with that rain in the northwest. More of that to come for most of us in the outlook as well. No sign of the weather settling down. Yes, there'll be some sunny spells, but there'll also be plenty of showers around and staying on the cool side well into next week.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome. I'm Alistair Stewart, and for the next 2 hours I'll be keeping you company on TV and radio.